Okay, so when I sat down to think about where to write this story, I put pen to paper. I really enjoy the tactile act of handwriting. It makes me feel more connected to myself, to the physical resources in the present moment, and to the intended recipient. I have only a small handful of friends that I write to, and they are scattered across the globe. The act of reaching out to someone so personally generates a tangible warmth in my body. I know this is a shared experience. I wasn't always so aware of my connection to myself, and I was pretty numb to connection with others. Not that I knew it at the time. I distinctly remember the day I recognized that something was going to have to change. I was sat on a bus making my way home, and as I happened to glance out the window, I saw a lady who looked outrageously angry and maybe a little bit dangerous. She'd knock you out, I thought, and in the same split second, I realized I was looking at my own reflection. I understood in that moment that my demeanor was harsh, aggressive, and unwelcoming. I certainly didn't feel as angry as I looked. My embodied state was one of disconnection, disassociation, and rejection. From then on, I decided that anytime I noticed my face do that bitchy resting thing, that I would flip it and exaggerate it into a smile. I trained this for what felt like years, but gradually over time it became easier. Then it became normal. And then I began to notice how positively other people were reacting to how I made them feel. Through this, I learned to be more and act more intuitively. And I was soon able to access a new world of connection and opportunities. I realized that how I showed up in the world, either consciously or unconsciously, could drastically impact the quality of connections I was able to make. I was so grateful of these experiences when I completely lost myself about 5 years ago during a profound period of debilitating grief. I went to a place that I couldn't get out of and where no one else could reach me. To be completely honest, I felt dead inside. I was blessed at this time to meet a musician from the other side of the world. A similar geographical setup, a small island in a post conflict setting. His music was so pure that it reached into the darkest corners of my soul and made me feel human again. For a time, I was at peace. This began my fascination with sound therapy and how it was that sound could feel and be so therapeutic at a time when I felt so disassociated from everything else. I went from just listening to joining in to performing solo to now teaching others how to do the same. I wasn't really interested in becoming a professional musician. For the most part, I was just working on reclaiming my voice to unlock something which I had shut down so many years ago without realizing it or intentionally deciding to do so. In taking up singing again, I learned how to self regulate my own traumatic incidents. I spent a lot of time observing how my body would react in various musical contexts and circumstances. I learned how to identify and correct the many distortions that I had clung to over the years regarding music, singing, and my own capacity for creative expression. I noticed that my reluctance to sing in public was deeply anchored to a sense of shame that I had accumulated over time in relation to my voice. Not just whether or not I thought I was a good singer, but even in relation to the things I thought were appropriate to say. In fact, I realized that I deeply believed my voice to be the main expression of my identity, and I genuinely didn't have anything nice to say about it. This realization was an eye opener. Around this time, I was chair of a local charity called Beyond Skin, And I remember hearing a story of a guy called Dr. Ahmad Sarmast, the director of the Women's Afghani Choir. Dr. Ahmad was named on the Taliban hit list as a dangerous priority target for giving women access to singing, instruments, and hope through music. When the Taliban had control in Afghanistan, they were said to have entirely banned the listening, learning, and playing of music. Dr. Ahmad's women's choir faced similar threats and were all ostracized from their respective families and communities for choosing to participate in music. I began to realize just how privileged a position I was in. I mean, there were these young women risking life and limb, sacrificing everything they knew just to sing. And here I was with all the access and opportunity in the world, and yet I felt wholly incapable of participating. But I persevered. I would sing through the screechy, crackly bits, upload videos of my singing to social media. I played any gig I was offered, and I began to run my own open mic nights, creating the community where other people could tackle their fears in a safe and nurturing environment, just like I had done. I started several of my own community projects, got involved with Girls Rock School, and I even fronted a three-piece band. I barely recognized myself or the life I had created, all centered around the desire for true connection to myself and others. Then lockdown happened. No more group singing, no more performances. But I didn't let that stop me. I took my work online and regarded it as one of the most necessary pieces of work I had ever done, especially at this time of extreme isolation and disconnection. One of my favourite projects that I worked on during lockdown was a community music project with Syrian refugee women. We would meet weekly on Zoom and chat and sing a few songs. It wasn't long before these women were opening up about some of the traumatic incidents relating to why they fled their homeland. Singing seemed to relieve pressure for these women, allowing them to relax and talk freely. I really felt the importance of what my facial expression was conveying as the translator spoke between us. Smiling, singing, and consciously not frowning all helped to create the environment which brought about healing and helped these women begin to alleviate traumas which they had stored in their bodies for years. I felt so honoured to do this work, to develop this deep sense of personal connection to these women and their stories of conflict, trauma, and resilience. And I have loads of examples like this over the years now, where by creating space and giving permission for others to express themselves vocally has been transformational and healing. As humans, we are designed to co-regulate. From the moment we are born, we learn to manage illness, overstimulation, environmental challenges, and trauma through co-regulation with our primary caregivers. And it's not something we grow out of. We just learn to value it less and less till it pales into insignificance, barely even a memory. Smiling, vocalizing, pranayama breathing practices all stimulate the vagus nerve, which has a direct impact on our connection to ourself and to others. Smiling, humming, and specific breathwork techniques are accessible interventions that we can all use to improve our mood, our internal landscape, enhance our relationships with others, even this very act of talking and sharing stories. We become less bound by fears of inadequacy or failure, and we say yes to more of the things that we really want. It expands our potential for accessing opportunities. If we genuinely want to create meaningful connections, we must begin by connecting authentically to the self. And by far the most effective way that I have found to do this is to sing and smile regularly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Roisin. Uh, Roisin or Roisin?
According to my parents, Roisin.
Well, the parents are never wrong. Come on. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Singing, that's a really fascinating way. You just got out of the way of it, or that you couldn't express yourself through what you used to?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up, in choirs and musicals, and I was very active in all that kind of stuff in school. And somewhere in my adolescence, I just abandoned all of it. I've since come to understand through trauma work that likely what occurred there was my nervous system, saying it doesn't feel safe to do that. Let's just stop. And because I wasn't consciously aware of what was occurring, I wasn't able to intervene and do anything about it. And so it took me to get some perspective on that, to realize A, the importance of it, and B, how my ego had distorted my understanding of what sort of innate qualities we have as humans. And so yeah, it really took me to experience that from an external point, to realize obviously the value of it and the connections that are possible through it. So yeah, I guess I could say once I realized that, everything else kind of peeled into insignificance.
It was fascinating. I loved that line, as I told you, about seeing looking at the bus window and saying, "Oh my God, who's that angry woman?"
Yeah, totally. And anyone who knows me now, if you've only met me in the last 5 years, you have no idea that that's who I used to be. And it is
Yeah.
quite literally just starting with training the muscles in your face to just not be so upset all the time, to just relax and let go. And it has a global effect on the entire body if you just start with the tongue and the jaw. So
Yeah, it really has an effect on anyone around you as well, obviously.
for sure, yeah, it sets the tone. I mean, everyone will know if they walk into a room, they can tell like if the if the mood's tense, or if there's something hanging in the air and they can't quite put their finger on it. And similarly, I mean, you guys don't need me to tell you, like you can feel when a good energy walks into the room, or you can tell when you're surrounded by sort of positivity before people have opened their mouths. And that's because of what they're sort of saying subliminally.